Meeting of the Lincoln Lancaster County Planning Commission of April 1st, 2020. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you are here to testify on agenda item 4.4, which is special permit 20005, relating to the transitional housing project located at 420 South 28th Street, the public hearing on this application is postponed as required by Directed Health Measure Order 2020-02 issued by the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department. In order to meet the required social distancing protocols, we must limit the number of people inside the chambers. Staff is assisting individuals who are present and wish to testify on items on today's agenda by ensuring that each person has signed in. Staff will direct you into the chambers based on what items you are testifying on and your position on that item. Please note that only one additional person will be allowed in the chambers at a time. Once you have testified, you should exit the chambers using the doors to the right of the front here, and then the next individual will be directed in. It is recommended that once you testify, you leave the building. Based on estimations, we are staggering the times of various hearings over several hours. These times are identified in parentheses on the agenda. We are encouraging attendees to arrive no more than 15 minutes before their scheduled hearing. Please note that an agenda item will not begin before the time posted. In the event that the allocated hearing times go quicker than estimated, there will be breaks in the hearing. If you parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupons are required. Out of courtesy for those attending the meeting, the commissioners and the staff, cellular phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. Are you going to let me know when you want to come up here?
Thank you, David Carey, the Director of the Planning Department. I just want to let you all know and let the audience know generally, the physicality of how this is going to work. We've had 2 City Council meetings set up this way since we last met, and this does work as long as we don't have the larger crowd, which is the purpose of the postponement of the other item that was from the Health Directive from the Health Department. It was clear we were going to have too many people here, so that is why that was put in place. The intention is that any future items that we expect to engender that much interest and attendance, those also will be delayed indefinitely. So it's just a point in time of reality of the situation of what we're dealing with COVID-19, and we will get back to that work when we can in a healthy and safe way. So what we have some people waiting in room 113 next door. We have a few people out in the hallway as well. They are appropriately socially distanced, and so we feel confident that we can pull this off in a safe way. But we will have staff working with those that are attending for the different items. So you'll see people coming in and asking people to leave the room. They may or may not stay out in the hallway to see our action ultimately on that item. But that is what we're going to do, and we're going to make it work. So I appreciate your attendance today, and we'll get going here. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, please note that the Planning Commission action today is final on the following items: 1.5, Special Permit 20009, 1.6, Special Permit 20010, and 4.5, Administrative Amendment 20007. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or the County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held March 4th, 2020.
So moved, Campbell.
Second, Edgerton.
Jerry?
Okay, Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Raymond Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jerry to read all of the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jerry, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Yes, before I do that, I would note that we received a request to remove item 1.4, change of zone 20009 from the consent agenda, as the applicant has requested a 2-week deferral to the April 15th hearing. So I will not be reading that into the consent agenda. We will act on that, or need a motion to defer.
I would make a motion to defer
We're
one.
gonna wait until do we have to do that right now?
We can do it following.
The consent agenda.
Right, we'll just pull it from the consent agenda at this point.
Okay,
And then we'll do a motion
okay.
for deferral. Okay, I also will note that although Commissioner Scheer is not present at today's hearing, it should be noted that he declared a conflict of interest on agenda items 1.1 A and B and 1.2 A and B. Okay. Start with item 1.1A is annexation 20001 to annex 49 acres, more or less, and the associated change of zone 20002 from AG Agricultural District to R5 Residential District Plan Unit Development, and from AG Agricultural District to O3 Office Park District Plan Unit Development with associated waivers, both on property generally located at 40th Street and Rokeby Road. Item 1.2A is annexation 20005 to annex approximately 34.89 acres and the associated change of zone 05085C from AG Agricultural District to R3 Residential District Plan Unit District on both on property generally located at Northwest 12th Street and Astor Road. Item 1.3 is changes zone 08066A from B3 Commercial District Plan Unit Development and from R3 Residential District to R6 Planned Unit Development to add additional residential area with waivers for the expansion of the Antelope Valley Planned Unit Development located on approximately 12.75 acres, more or less, on property generally located at North 24th and Q Streets. Item 4.1 is changes zone 2009, which was removed from the consent agenda, and the applicant has requested a 2-week deferral. Item 1.5 is special permit 20009 to allow for a 30,000-gallon propane tank on property generally located at 1305 Broad Street, Lancaster County, Nebraska. This is final action on this item unless appealed to the county board within 14 days. Item 1.6 is special permit 20010 to allow for on-sale alcohol associated with a restaurant on property generally located at 6105 Havelock Avenue. Again, this is final action on this item unless appealed to the city council within 14 days. The last item on consent is item 1.7, text amendment 20001, amending Lincoln Municipal Code, section 27.72.120, height and lot regulations for accessory buildings, to remove the condition that accessory buildings with a conditioned area shall be no taller than the main building on the same lot, and repealing said section as hitherto existing. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these items?
I have one, Jerry.
Okay.
So on item 1.7, the text amendment 20001,
Okay.
staff presented that at the Mayor's Neighborhood Roundtable on March 9th.
Okay. Thank you. Noted.
Any others?
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting any of these sites?
I don't see any. Okay, so we're ready for
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on any of these consent agenda items? If so, please inform a staff member where you are seated or where you are waiting and state that request.
Okay, I'm not seeing any signals. Okay, so looks like we're ready to entertain
I'll move approval of the consent agenda. Beckius?
Second, Ryman Yost.
discussion.
Just wanted to take a quick moment, seeing as this is our first Planning Commission meeting since we've instituted social distancing throughout the community. Just wanted people to know that the Planning Commissioners do receive your communication via email. We do read it. It is part of the public record, and we pay careful attention to that information that comes in. We understand during this time that social distancing may make it so that it's not possible for people to come and testify in person, and we certainly encourage social distancing. And we just want you to know, or I think I can speak on behalf of my fellow commissioners, that getting your comments to us via email is more than acceptable. We will read it. It is part of the public record, and we consider it just as if you were here testifying in front of us too. If you have questions about an application coming before the Planning Commission, please do not hesitate to reach out to the planner assigned to that application. And if you have any additional concerns about an application, please do not hesitate to email planning staff and to let them know of those concerns, so that that email can be forwarded to us so that we can read it and make proper consideration of it.
And I just want to add in there that if it's not final action, there is time for you to submit your comments as it goes to either city council or the county board. And so if your questions aren't answered, as of today, you still have time before that action is taken from one of those bodies as well. Any other comments about consent? Okay.
Do we need to defer 1.4 ahead of time?
No, we'll do that after we approve the consent.
Okay.
So I think we're ready for a vote on consent agenda.
Okay, I have Beckius moving and Raymond second. Okay. Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Wyman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
I would then move we defer 1.4 for 2 weeks.
I'm going to have Jerry, because we've got more than one, so I'm going to have Jerry call the request for deferral.
Actually, we do only have one.
Oh, we do only have the one. I thought we
But-
had another one.
No.
Yeah, we do.
Not in the consent. It's in the other part.
We've already notified that 4.4 is delayed the applicant has asked for a delay of 2 weeks on 4.4.
4.4.
Do we not have to vote on 4.4 since we're following?
There is no request for deferral for 4.4. We're doing a public hearing on 4.4. Or I'm sorry. No, there's no public hearing. There's no deferral either.
It's postponed
It's
indefinitely.
just postponed
Okay.
due to the
So
health
we don't have to
directive.
vote to do that?
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. I'm sorry.
No, it's a new world, so.
Yes, it is.
We're trying to figure it out.
Okay, so Jerry, do you want to read that 1.4,
Sure.
just so that we have it in the record what we're deferring?
Yes, absolutely. We have received a request on behalf of the applicant for a 2-week deferral of change of zone 20009 from R3 residential district to R3 planned unit development to allow up to 130,000 square feet of commercial floor area and up to 322 single and multifamily dwelling units with waivers to the zoning and subdivision regulations on property generally located at South 59th Circle and Pine Lake Road.
Okay, so we have a motion to defer. Do I have a second?
Second, Albadri.
All right. Any discussion before we vote on that? Okay, Jerry.
Okay, Albadre,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Is there anyone wishing to testify on the change of zone that we just deferred rather than waiting until the April 15th hearing? Can you see them back there? Because I can't see them.
Yeah, I can see and no.
No? Okay. All right, so we'll now proceed to public hearing. The staff will make a brief presentation. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. If during your testimony you have copies of documents or materials to present to the Planning Commission members, please display them on the overhead display. If you want to leave copies for the record, please place them in the folder located on the podium. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes, then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, will you please call the first public hearing item?
Yes. Item 4.1 is text amendment 20002 to amend Lincoln Municipal Code Section 27.02 definitions, 27.02.040C campgrounds, and 27.02.190R recreational vehicle, and amend special permit for campgrounds per section 27.63.270, and repealing said sections as hitherto existing. Staff recommendation is for approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
I don't see any.
Are there, never mind. We're good.
Tom Chaka, planning staff. This feels backwards. This application is to amend the city zoning regulations pertaining to campgrounds. The amendment includes modifying definitions, or modifying the definition of campground to include cabins and other recreation accommodations to the definition. This would allow, as camping evolves and different types and uses are allowed or being used for campgrounds, this would not limit that type of use. The amendment also amends the definition for recreational vehicle to delete the size restriction on recreational vehicle and to add that recreational accommodations and park model RVs are part of the definition. The size of the recreational vehicle or other accommodation really does not impact the use on surrounding property owners. The second part of this amendment is to modify the conditions under the special permit section. This would add a condition that a campground must have a minimum of 40 campsites. This would prevent someone from saying they want to have a campground, but really all they're doing is parking 10 or 20 trailers on their property, and that's pretty much all they're doing. So by having a limit of campsites, it would be more in what we would assume or refer to as a campground. The proposed setbacks on the campground would be a 60-foot side and rear yard and a 50-foot front yard. In the AG district, setbacks currently for uses are a 50-foot front yard, a 60-foot side yard, and a 100-foot rear yard. This would reduce the 100-foot rear yard down to 60 feet. Another added condition is that the access to the campground must come off of a paved street. Internal roads to the campground shall be 14 feet in width if they're one-way or 24 feet for two-way traffic. The limits on stays, the campground may be occupied by the same person for no more than 31 days in a calendar year. However, there is an added condition that 35% of the total campsites could be set aside and allow a camper to stay there up to 180 days in any 365-day period. So we say 365-day period instead of calendar year, so there isn't the, nobody could stay up till December 31st and then stay for another 6 months into a new calendar year. So it would be in a 365-day period. Sale of alcoholic beverages would not be allowed in the campground. This, however, would not prohibit somebody from bringing their own alcohol in on their own. And the last condition would be screening or fencing may be required. That would be on an individual basis and up to the Planning Commission if they deem that was a reasonable requirement. Any questions?
So a special permit would still be required of an applicant, correct?
Yes, special permit is required for a campground.
And these were essentially similar to the provisions that were brought forward to us with the previous application?
And the county one, yes, they're similar.
Okay, but they're part of the city regulations?
This is only for the city zoning regulations, which, just to remind people, city zoning regulations go, have jurisdiction 3 miles beyond the city limits.
Did we do the, in the county one, did we have G also, the sale of alcoholic beverages? It doesn't
I
ring a
don't
bell.
think, if I recall correctly, I don't believe that was in the initial one, but I think it was going to be added.
Okay, and is that something that they can ask a waiver on if, say, they wanted to have that in their convenience store on site?
Sure, yes, they could. Any condition, they can ask a waiver to any of the conditions unless it's specifically stated in the special permit section, in this section, that certain conditions cannot be waived.
Okay, and we don't have that in this, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's my question, thank you.
And these provisions were brought forth by the applicant and then obviously reviewed by staff and determined that and staff's recommendation is to go forward. But there was no community task force or any community group that was brought together to review these. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I can't believe no one's asked this most important question. So when you're kind of changing some of the, definitions, are we going to be able to have yurts in these?
I didn't hear that. Did I?
I think that would fall under other recreational accommodations. We left it broad. A yurt, teepees, tree forts. I mean, I've
Some
seen
awesome
all of
stuff.
them. If you research campgrounds, there's tree houses and all kinds of things. So we didn't want to try to list everything, so we
Right.
left it broad.
And I noticed too that you took out, before it mentioned something about a boat, being mounted on a trailer. So just because that's crossed out, I would assume that it's still allowed.
Correct.
Okay. Can you talk about, I know this came up when we were talking about the county version, the campground versus the campsite, and can you kind of distinguish the difference between the two?
Well, I guess I would call the campground the entire area, including recreational facilities, offices, stores, camps, the individual campsites, open space, everything. Where campsites would be specifically where you park your trailer, RV, or set up a tent.
I kind of think of like just the pad site where they're renting. Okay. I know there was concern before about the 30 days and the 365 and all that kind of stuff. So hypothetically speaking, if we had someone come in and stay 30 days, leave for 30 days and then return and stay another 30 days, would that push them into that 35% category?
Good point. Because we say no more than 31 days in a calendar year, 35%. I mean, the
Yeah, because of 32 days.
the thinking was that if somebody stayed long-term, it would be consistent.
I'm just thinking of, say someone came to care for someone in the family that was ill. They came for a month, person gets better, they go back to wherever they're from, but the person then gets sick again, so they come back and stay for another month. I just didn't know which would apply.
The way it's written, and maybe Kent Seacrest can answer this better,
Okay.
or Tim. But the way I would read it, I think what you're saying would be allowed as long as they're under that 35% threshold.
Okay.
That's a good point, especially with the current events that we have nowadays.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it says between 32, so total in a calendar period, or 63 or 65, it doesn't have it
We-
continuous or not.
The one thing the current code says is 30 days. We changed that to 31 days just because some months have 31 days in them.
And that's kind of why I picked 30, just to be difficult, I guess. Any other questions for staff right now?
I had a
Yeah.
quick question about the minimum of 40 campsites. So tell me what happens if you did have that circumstance where there was a property owner who had allowed 20 campers onto her property. So what, obviously this provision does not apply, but what are the ramifications of that situation in terms of the public view?
It would basically be something that's not in conformance with the zoning code, and anytime you have something that's like that, it usually takes a complaint from a neighbor, and then building and safety are the ones that investigate that. They would go out and investigate it, and if it was a violation, they would send them a letter telling them they need to
And start that
stop.
process.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
As a follow-up to the commissioner's question, what, from the city's point of view, I don't know about the developer, but from the city's point of view, why does the city support a limit of, a minimum of 40 units for a campground?
I think we were trying to come up with a number, and it could be 30 or 50. But we were trying to come out with a number that would kind of qualify it for what most people would think of a campground, but not be overly an excessive number amount. Information we got from the applicant stated that the average number of campsites and campgrounds across the state is around 70. We didn't want to be that restrictive, so just kind of picked 40.
Okay, and then just for my own understanding, to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, Tom, a park model RV, I assume that is an RV that is owned by the park that is then leased on a short-term basis to
Well,
a
I
third
think-
party?
No. I think
What is a
Kent
park-
can.
what is a
well, I
park
didn't know
model
what it was
RV?
either.
I had
so
to Google it.
I looked it up, and I printed this off. It's basically looks almost like a cabin on wheels.
Sure.
Tiny house.
It doesn't necessarily have to be owned by the campground. I suppose the campground could have a few and own them and rent them out. But these are on trailers. They're made to be portable and moved around.
So they're a mobile home.
Well, they're not a mobile home because they don't meet the definition of mobile home. Then they don't have the stamp that is required to be a mobile home. That's my
But
understanding.
they have no ability to move on their own.
Well, they're on a trailer, and my understanding is
They
they
cannot
remain
propel
on
their
a
own energy. They cannot move on
Correct,
their own.
correct.
Like a
Like
camper.
like a travel trailer.
Correct. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any more questions for staff at this time? Okay, applicant.
Good afternoon. My name is Kent Seacrest, and I'm representing Dave, Chris, and Jolene Queen, who are the operators of Campaway at the intersection of I-180, Superior Street, and I-80. Last time we were in front of you, we brought our friends and neighbors from North Lancaster County, and we got to chat with you for 7 hours. I will assure you that this hearing will be very much shorter. Dave and Chris Queen will be testifying after I do. But just, again, for background, we have a lease with the city. It expires in 2025. Since then, we're in negotiations with the city to extend that lease. Now, we haven't finalized it, but we're even talking up to 5 more years. But we don't know if it'll come to pass. We don't know if the council. So we still need this text amendment to bring us up to date and in compliance and allow us to search for a site that's within 3 miles of Lincoln or inside the city of Lincoln. So that's important to us. The other issue that we just want to talk to you about is right now, the last time I think this code was updated was 1966. If you think about it, there probably wasn't much of an RV back in 1966. There probably were a couple, but the industry's taken off.
They didn't have yurts back then?
No, they did not. And one of the things that I think is interesting to note is when we wrote this, we said 30 days. And what a couple of things that I think is important is we now are realizing that's not maybe as wise of a plan given what the use of campgrounds are today. One of the things I would point out is Lynn Johnson recently got a request as Parks Director from a person who would like to stay more than 30 days because of a medical reason. And the city just at the end of the month granted that request. So the city itself is recognizing the 30 days has become problematic to the industry. So let's talk a moment about definitions. Overnight guests, I pretend they're up to 30 days or 31 days. And then what I call seasonal guests would be from the 31 to up to 180 days. And we're just seeing a lot of need for seasonal guests in this community. The staff gave you examples of what those fact patterns are that we're running into. And it's increased since 1966 when the ordinance was written. Lancaster Event Center, who does not need to comply with zoning, they allow guests to stay. They sell, for example, a football season package for 3 months themselves. And if with permission from the director of Lancaster Events, you can stay longer. You just need to get their permission. And there's no limitation. We're at least putting a limitation of 180 days in this ordinance for that purpose along the way. I would also point out to you that the county nor the city are regulating how long you can stay at a hotel or a motel. And so this 30 days, again, I think is showing its archaic aspects to it. So we think that it's appropriate. If the hotels, motels don't have a 30-day limitation, why should campgrounds along the way? And we did our research, and between Lancaster County along the I-80 corridor from Douglas to Hall, which is our competitors, so to speak, Douglas, Sarpy, Cass, Seward, York, Hall, and Hamilton and Odo allow seasonal guests, more than 30 days along the line. And 46% of the national campgrounds are relying on seasonal guests. Why? It can be profitable to raise the revenue necessary to provide the higher amenities, because in 1966 the campground didn't have much. Today's modern high amenity campground has lots of features that take money.
What was the percentage you mentioned? 46?
46%.
Thank you.
And so camping's just increased, period. 61% or $75 million are deemed active campers now. This is up from 58% in 2014. And in 2018, there were 41 million people went camping or clamping or whatever term of art you want to use these days. So it is a growing industry. And they want to reconnect with nature and relax and avoid stress and spend more time with families. So those are the main reasons along the way. We had a letter earlier from Lynn Johnson indicating support. You also had a letter in the past from Jeff Mall, Lancaster Convention visitor. The rodeos that are coming and others, that this is a good tool for allowing people to come. You have in front of you 28 emails indicating support, and I don't believe any opposition on this one. And again, after listening to 7 hours at the Planning Commission, the staff got to also listen to 6 hours at the county board level, along with their other due diligence. With all that wisdom, they're now recommending approval of this application, and we appreciate that. And the applicant has no further amendments, and we would ask you to support this as well. And finally, I just want to take a personal note to thank you for coming out today and playing such a vital role of government. You don't realize how you meeting and keeping things going in this community is so important for jobs and job creation and people sustaining their jobs. So we are all indebted to your service and willing to be here in such trying times. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Perhaps you heard Tracy's earlier question with regard to the, the situation where someone was staying someplace
Right.
30 days, then left, and then came back. What's your interpretation of how that would be handled?
Okay. The first time, they're under 31 days, and so we don't count them towards the 35%. But the second, third, or fourth time they would show up, they would be in the accounting of towards the 35% limitation.
So it would be within the purview of the campsite owner to be monitoring where their 35% is, and if someone wanted to come back and yet they were close to or at that threshold, they would have to say no.
That's correct.
Okay.
And again, the city has the right to audit. So it's not just the campground operator has to do this, but city has the right to be sure the campground operator is doing it correctly.
Do we have the ability to come back and request a more than 35%, say, with current times, it becomes medically, the campground would like to have more than 35% because of the clientele they're serving? Is that an option to do that once you already have a campsite in place?
As far as the tech's concerned, that's not an option, but here's
Okay.
Lynn Johnson approving. Right now, we can only do 30 days, and he's saying, go ahead, but for medical reasons, and do more than 30 days. So I suppose staff can not enforce it on somebody.
Right.
I mean, they have to get a special permit to do
build
this,
it.
so, I mean, I would assume they could amend the special permit when they apply for it.
Okay. I just don't want to tie their
Yeah.
hands, especially with what we're dealing with.
Tim C., City Law Department.
Hi,
I
Tim.
can appreciate the question, understand that we become more aware of situations in current times, but the way this ordinance is written, 35% is a maximum. It would take probably a change of the ordinance to allow for that to expand.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying. So I'm going to follow up on that because I was kind of thinking along the same lines. Since your client is the one that put forth this text amendment, do they feel confident in that 35%, that that's going to be a large enough percentage for them to operate?
They're testifying next. I'd allow you to ask them.
Okay.
I'm sure they'd be glad to take a number larger than 35% if you feel 35% is too low.
I have another question for you really quick. Can you just explain to me how you arrived at the proposal for the 60-foot yard setback for the rear yard, and why not the 100?
If you look at the typical zoning ordinance, 35 feet is a big setback on certain intense land uses in Lincoln. Industrial is 10 feet. Retail would be 25, 35 feet. Between you and I and a fence post, I don't know why a campground is even that 60, but it's sure 100 feet was compared to other land uses, which we don't require that type of setback on. That'd be my simple answer.
Thank you. Any other questions right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Seacrest, could you discuss a little bit as to the 40 campsite proposal that was brought forth in order to, as a minimum?
Well, that wasn't in our original, but staff felt important that if we're going to really do campgrounds correctly, you need a minimum threshold of size. They don't want a lot of small things popping up in funny places in this community, and they felt 40 was a good, safe number to be sure you at least had enough, because we do want amenities. And if you're only doing 10 or 15, you could do that in your backyard practically, and was not the intent. We feel that this is a category, it should be treated professionally, and staff's judgment was 40 was that number.
Okay, so your client doesn't care about the number?
Yeah, if we're going to be in this business, we'll be doing more than 40 because of economies of scale.
Sure. And then the restriction on alcohol, thoughts?
Well, that's been our practice. And we believe we can live with that requirement. Now, the next person might ask you for the waiver.
Sure.
But again, this is family-oriented, and whenever we talk family-oriented, historically, be it sports fields or other fields, we've not tried to say, let's bring alcohol where there's a lot of kids. So we're comfortable with that. But
Okay, so this wasn't your proposal, this was from the city?
no, if you maybe don't remember, but when we were going around the last time, we were willing to say that because that's been our operations, and we think it works for us.
Thank you, Mr. Seacrest.
Other questions?
I think you're off the hook for now.
Thank you.
All right. Any testimony in support of this application?
Hi, Commissioners. Thank you, Commissioners, for hearing us again. It's under better circumstances, I hope, anyway. Purpose of this text amendment is twofold. First is to apply to our special permit that we have with the city right now, that we're in negotiations with. Secondly, it forms a framework for any new special permit that we would apply for in the future for building a replacement campground. We believe that we have a major impact in Lincoln's tourism economy. These are not local dollars. This is revenue that we've brought in from the area from the outside. If you notice that all those letters of support that you got, every one was from outside this region. It's because we're bringing people in, and this is a place where they stay. Using the smallest dollar amount multiplier from the Lincoln's Visitors Bureau, we have an impact of $3.3 million from May to October. This doesn't factor in somebody buying a big ticket item such as a camper from Leach Sales or a truck to pull it, and it happens quite a bit. During those same months, we pay out over $158,000 in wages, $250,000 for the year. The 2019 Association of RV Parks and Campground survey shows that seasonal guests are normal practice in the camping industry. Florida, Texas, you name all those states, they all have tons of campgrounds that cater 100% to seasonals. In fact, it's a major economic driver in those states. There's at least 3 campgrounds located in Cass County that are 100% seasonal. and we're not trying to be 100% seasonal. But as I mentioned last time, around 93% of our reservations stay less than 7 days. This is our core business and our focus 365 days a year. Something I probably didn't make very clear last time is that it takes 18 of these reservations to make one monthly stay. I don't know if it showed up on the screen here or not.
They'll switch it in just a second, I think.
Okay.
Maybe.
No? There we go.
Well,
They're figuring things
Okay.
out too, just like us.
not a problem.
There we go.
Come up? Okay, well, you can see that it takes 85 reservations, or 80, that would equal the amount of five people staying for a month. So you can see why it's important to us as business owners and campground owners to have that 35% in there. Some of the reasons for the length of stay, of course, were given in the notes of the text amendment. Traveling nurses, grandparents visiting the summer are just a few. We also need that flexibility to ensure that we can meet the financial obligations to banks as we develop a new park, especially at the beginning of the park's life cycle. Thank you again. Any questions?
Can you state that, you said, I didn't get it down fast enough.
Sorry.
What percentage of your stays are more than 30 days?
Well, 7%.
Okay,
But like you say, you expand that out,
Sure.
using, 30 days times 7% comes up to a big number. It amounts to about 20% of our revenue.
now, do you think that 35% is a high enough threshold? Is that too low? How did you?
Well,
come
I'd
up
always like more, but we felt when talking with the planning department that was a reasonable number. In fact, at Campaway, it's more like 25%. But we bumped up that extra 10% for insurance for any new campground that we build.
So as you look at it from this being a city ordinance, do you think being closer to and in the city district would warrant having that percentage be higher?
Actually, I think it's about the same.
Okay,
We're close enough at being out in the county that it would have been about the same.
about the same? Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Queen right now?
And yurts are popular, so.
All right,
And
thank
Chris,
you.
Chris is coming in and he's going to talk a little bit how we've been responding to the coronavirus thing and stuff like that,
Okay.
and our responsibilities to the people for that. Thank you.
Awesome,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Hello again.
It's a long walk these days. huh?
It is. Hi. Thanks for being here and letting us talk. I'm Chris Queen. I'm with Campaway at 200 Camper Circle. Basically, privately owned campgrounds are jacks of all trades. We have to basically operate and bridge three unique industries, travel and tourism, short-term residency, and then also parks and wildlife. Currently, with what we're facing right now, many states and counties are considering campgrounds, especially privately owned campgrounds, as essential businesses, even in New York and Washington, the major hotspots there. We're able to provide unique services and quickly evolve to accommodate the emergency situations, such as the Howland tornado, the right now, and Missouri River flooding. We've got experience with that sort of stuff. The state of California just, I think last week, bought 1,309 RVs to house as emergency isolation for their frontline staff and also vulnerable citizens. Both overnight and extended stay campgrounds are included in the designations. Essential tradespeople are continuing to use their RVs as their home and office as they work and provide service to the communities. Things like the South Beltway project is still ongoing. The pipeline, the Magellan pipeline in Roca is ongoing, that sort of stuff. Until the end of February, Campaway played host to a number of frontline medical professionals who, under the current law, municipal code, all had to leave for other communities. Just because of the codes were written in the 1960s. So instead of doing positions here, they're doing helping in other communities. So also, besides their professional expertise of these trades, We also want their lodging, their gas, their food, and their entertainment dollars here in the area rather than sending them and everything they bring 20, 30 miles away. Then rather than using the close quarters of airplanes and hotel hallways, citizens are using RVs to safely travel back home. The rental RV industry is up. But they're also using it as their temporary lodging to stay in place. There's a lot of people in Arizona that are staying. We've had a lot of cancellations because of that. We're stuck in Texas, we're stuck in wherever. They bring their own sleeping quarters. They maintain their distances, and they recharge in the fresh air and the sunlight. And finally, when life transitions back to the new normal, whatever that happens to be, private campgrounds can rapidly transform back into the family travel spots, the tourism destinations, the regional base camps, and the home away from home. And that's it for me. Thank you. Did you have any questions?
Any questions?
No.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Further testimony in support of this application. He giving you the green light?
There's nobody there.
Think that's it? Okay. Any testimony in opposition on this application? Testimony in opposition? Nope, okay. Staff questions? Got a couple, I think.
Yeah, couple.
Go for it.
Okay, so my question is still dealing with the 35%, especially in the city, having this be a city ordinance or text amendment, because we have the density, we're near town, we have some of the challenges that we talked about on the opposite side out in the county regulations. So what if we wanted to allow more than 35% for their ability to house, like the things that they just mentioned with the temporary nursing, all of the things that we could be dealing with in the next, I don't know how many months or years. Is that something that's an option?
Right now, the way it's presented, it's at the 35%. I think we kind of came up with the 35%. One time it was 50%. We went a little back and forth with the applicant. We wanted to start off a little bit smaller at 35%, see if that was doable, if that worked for them, see how that goes, and maybe a few years down the road, if they needed more and it wasn't an issue, we could look at changing it at that point. We also were trying to find a balance between how many would we allow for a longer stay, and still the use is still predominantly a campground. And we didn't want to, get to where, are you getting to such a high percentage with long-term stays that you're really starting to cross the threshold into like a mobile home park. And so we thought to start out with 35% was a good figure that gets the applicant what they need for now, and I think would address the issues.
Right, because now they say they're at 25. From everything we've seen and read, they do such a great job managing that I can see them being a pretty big hub for us as a community. And 25 could ramp up pretty quickly. That's all, from what I've been reading and seeing. I don't know how everybody else feels, and I don't want to push a rope either. I'm not saying that that's what I'm trying to do.
Tom, do you have comments or questions?
Yeah, Tom. So just so I understand correctly, the applicant currently is being allowed to participate in camping that may not be meeting code today by the city. Is that correct, at the site that they have currently?
Yeah, my understanding was that, they had been allowing stays over 30 days, which they thought that they were allowed to do.
Sure. Okay.
So this will put it in the ordinance and clear it up. And
sure. Okay. Thank you.
Other questions for staff?
I have one. For over 3 years, the Marriott Residence Inn out in our area has had rooms reserved by FEMA, and literally nonstop for 3 years. And so with the hotels, especially long-term stay hotels, being allowed to do this, I question that maybe the 180 days is not even sufficient in some cases.
Yeah, I guess I can't really answer that. I don't know how the rules apply to the hotels and long-term stays, and if it's, is FEMA exempt from that anyways. I couldn't answer that. That's more for, I think, Tim C. to answer.
I don't think there is any restrictions on the length of stay.
Right, but they're not campgrounds. They're,
Right.
I mean, they're different, in a different category altogether.
Right.
Yep, different.
Here he comes.
I mean, they need to be considered separately.
Yeah, Tim C. again, City Law, that you answered your own question. The answer is that there are two different types of uses. They have different restrictions that go with them. And as to the question of reducing it for certain circumstances, I guess I would just remind the Planning Commission that we're writing an ordinance here that is a permanent land use and that it will be applied long after we are through these current circumstances. So I wouldn't want to try to legislate for current circumstances and then apply it afterwards. So,
Thank you. Further questions for staff?
This is not so much of a question, but just to kind of piggyback off of what Christy was saying. I feel comfortable with the 35%, just thinking about the communities that we're also going into. And, in the future, if we need to revisit it, we can definitely revisit it, but 35 sounds pretty reasonable.
Okay. All right, applicant, do you have any rebuttal for us? You're good, okay. Unless you guys have questions, no? Okay. So,
I would move that we approve.
oh, wait.
Close the public hearing.
I move we close the public hearing.
Second, Troy.
Jerry?
Okay, El Badre,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Beckius.
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay.
I would then move that we approve text amendment 20002.
Second, Albatri.
Oh, yeah.
Discussion.
Well, I think this really helps solve what we saw in all of the hearings we had and all of that there really weren't some regulations in place to really deal with this animal. And I think this really helps clean the message up.
I really think that there's been an appropriate balance struck here that encourages recreational activities, looks at broader uses in the context of what this campground protection is, and also protects the surrounding property.
I am very supportive of the applicant. I think we have seen from a number of people giving testimony via email in the last week or two, in a conjunction with testimony that we had received on a previous application from the applicant, that they do a good job of managing what they do. I do have some concerns of conflating the issues before us today with the text amendment before us. I don't necessarily believe that 40 is some magical number. I don't necessarily think that you can't have a family-friendly environment without the sale of alcohol. I think that there's some things in here that, I do worry would prohibit other people from running a similar business. and it appears that the current issue before the applicant of them currently running their business as they want to seems to be okay with the city of Lincoln, and there doesn't seem to be an issue currently, since there doesn't seem to be any sort of compliance issue through the city of Lincoln. So I don't want to conflate those issues with the text amendment that we have before us, and I'm just not quite sure that I think this fits better a lot of these things fit better in the city. I'm just not sure that I'm not sure that this quite makes sense yet for me.
I am in support, though, of the text amendment, but I do agree with my fellow commissioners, and would be supportive in the future at looking at some of these other changes as we see how it works for private campgrounds. I think because we do allow other campgrounds, we have rodeos, we have football games, we have all kinds of things that happen annually in the past since '66 and moving forward. So I think that we don't want to tie their hands, as Commissioner Becky has mentioned, from allowing those types of growth. So, but this is a great first step, and I'll be supporting the amendment, or the text.
I think it's important when we're looking at a text amendment that this is going to be over all of the city, not just for this particular business. I think that we're doing a great job of clarifying some of the rules, and I think that this is a good starting point for that 35%, and if we need to increase it, a couple of years down the road, or if we need to decrease it, however we need to go, this is a good starting point for that. So I'll be supporting this text amendment, and I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, this is for the approval of text amendment 20002. Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Raymond Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
No.
And Core.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-1.
Okay, I think we're ready for the next one.
Okay, moving on to item 4.2 is Street and Alley Vacation 20002 to vacate that portion of West Saunders Avenue lying west of the west line of Northwest 10th Street and east of the east line of Cornhusker Highway, generally located at 1010 West Cornhusker Highway. Staff recommendation is that this does not conform to the comprehensive plan. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this item?
I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting this site?
I don't think we have any of those either. Brian.
Good afternoon, Brian Will, Planning Department. I'm putting up the exhibit that shows the area currently being petitioned for vacation. It's just southwest of the intersection of West Saunders and Northwest 10th. It's right at the curve in Cornhusker Highway here. As you're going out to the airport, Cornhusker Highway here, curves go north and goes underneath I-80. Maybe a little bit of background that I think is probably sort of important here, that I think kind of plays into this, sort of helps get us to the point where we're at today. I think at least explains the planning department's recommendation for not finding that this street and alley vacation conforms with the comprehensive plan. And that really relates to zooming out a little bit. And so here would be the area that we're talking about vacating here today. And so as we zoom out and look at the larger area, we've got this zoning pattern, H3, this R4, and then H3 here. We originally had started conversation with the applicant several months ago, and the question was about rezoning this triangular parcel here from R4 to perhaps H3 or something, to allow something other than residential uses on it. And as we started looking at this area, not necessarily opposed to a change of zone, but I think that city staff was thinking this little bit bigger picture and perhaps taking an opportunity to maybe improve conditions in this part of the city. And partly what I'm describing is, if you look at the streets here, the streets are not improved to current city standards. And rather than just straight out rezoning the triangular parcel that I was just showing you, staff was suggesting maybe looking at this a little bit bigger picture. And so with this graphic here, so here again, the area to be vacated, triangular parcel that initially was being discussed for change of zone. The planning department is suggesting looking at a little bit bigger picture and considering what else maybe could be done here to maybe help improve conditions, help the applicant perhaps get better use of the property as well. And so one of the things that was being suggested was what's shown in this exhibit here. And so what this is describing is vacating actually a portion of Northwest 9th Street, redoing the intersection, actually extending Northwest 10th Street, perhaps down to a new intersection with Cornhusker Highway, and eliminating a driveway from 1010 Cornhusker Highway as well. And so it's this exhibit that primarily gets us to the discussion here today of why we're recommending against this, is that if some sort of redevelopment plan like this were approved for the area, this connection here to Cornhusker Highway would actually require some of the right-of-way that's being proposed for vacation here today. So what I've identified in yellow on this exhibit are properties that are owned by the applicant. So it's this one, it's this property here, then of course the vacant triangular parcel, and then this property here. And so part of what we're thinking with vacating this portion of Northwest 9th, it helps consolidate these properties here. Rezoning this to something commercial, it would allow commercial traffic to flow past already zoned commercial properties to get to now a potentially rezoned commercial property. So here again, I'm not suggesting that we have all the details worked out. We just haven't reached that point with the applicant. So what we're suggesting is, with the report today, is that this request to vacate that little stub of West Saunders is premature. We're hopeful that some other plan for redeveloping this area, which, by the way, adjacent to Cornhusker Highway, entryway corridor, there have been many efforts over the years to help improve that, and that's really what we're getting at here. Hopefully we can reach some other plan here that works for both the developer, the property owner, and the city. So because the potential need for some of that right-of-way, if some sort of plan does come to fruition, we're suggesting that this request before you today is premature. So with that, we're recommending against it. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So the applicant, from my understanding, originally talked to you about potentially doing something with the larger triangular piece of property, but currently the applicant has no wishes to redevelop this section. Is that correct, as your understanding?
Not a larger redevelopment that involves all of the properties at this time, no.
Okay. Did the applicant give you an idea as to their intended use for the parcel that we're talking about?
No, and the applicant is here, and he can probably better answer that than me, but suggested that something residential allowed under the R4 really wasn't appropriate here. Was looking for more intense zoning. I think based on the zoning pattern, you're really talking about H3 zoning.
Sure, sure. Okay.
But did not have a specific use in mind, no.
And I'm assuming that the city has not designated any funding at all for any improvement. Of course, that would be a part of a redevelopment agreement, blah, blah, blah. I'm assuming that there's no city funds at this point in time to say, hey, I want to throw some more money at Cornhusker improvements.
Yeah, we had conversations internally. I haven't been able to find anything up to this point.
Okay.
No.
And then does the city, it looks like that's not a separate parcel, but just part of the public right-of-way, the little sliver that we're talking about.
You mean what
Yeah,
we're
that
trying to
one.
vacate here?
Uh-huh.
Yes, it's just a little portion of previously dedicated right-of-way.
Okay. Does the city rent it to the adjacent landowner?
No.
Okay.
The city generally does not rent right-of-way.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you, Mr. Will. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Campbell.
Brian, if you flip the other map on where you're extending 10th, did this layout come from planning or from transportation?
Planning came up with this concept.
But the reason I ask that is because I know transportation likes to keep as much 90-degree intersections, and it would seem that the extension of Northwest 10th on that angle doesn't, especially on the strength of that curve, that is a fairly strong curve there.
Yeah, actually, what you want is for this to actually intersect Cornhusker at a 90, so it would have to have a bend. Now, this was a renowned artist that drew this, Brian Will, and so my rendering here may be a little bit off, but it's trying to represent that Northwest 10th would not come straight down and intersect Cornhusker at an angle. It would try to be curved as much as possible so that that intersection would be as close as 90 degrees. May have to do some sort of deviation to get it to that point, but that would be the intent, to get it as close to a 90-degree intersection as possible.
And why the extension to 10th rather than leaving 9th? Because you've got Dawes up above that's an
let me put up this one. So, yes, so, okay, so here's what we're talking about vacating. So these properties here are commercial already. This is a dwelling here, I believe, but it is commercially zoned already as well. These properties over here are residential, and so we're thinking that if there's commercial rezoning here, that rather than continuing to bring traffic up through here to serve this commercial area, you can have it come this way instead. So this is really a trade-off of this new intersection for this one going away, and then this existing driveway for, I think it's a body shop, it's auto sales, sort of, maybe they repair wrecked vehicles perhaps, I'm not sure, the applicant could tell us better, but this driveway goes away. It does have access, fronts onto 10th Street, so it could take access off 10th Street, and we've achieved another goal of eliminating driveways like this onto major arterial roadways like Cornhusker Highway. So here again, I'm not, we haven't solved every question that needs to be answered with this. What we're suggesting is from the planning department's perspective, there's something better here than rushing forward with a street and alley vacation and just rezoning the triangle to H4 and letting it go at that. the public benefit of rezoning that to H4 is pretty limited, at least in the department's view. I would also note that thinking about a bit of consolidation here is there are some development constraints on this property. So both in addition to having multiple frontage, so multiple front yard setbacks, there's a public sanitary sewer main that extends approximately to the site, something like that. And so that is 30 feet wide, which would be something approximately like that. Now, you couldn't put buildings on it. You could put parking lot on it perhaps, but it does inhibit the development potential of that property. So thinking about perhaps consolidating that with other holdings, we thought that would be or could work to the benefit of the petitioner as well. Okay. But so here again, it was the hope was trying to get some larger redevelopment here going, something that benefits the larger neighborhood overall, getting a public benefit out of if there is a street nullification, if there is rezoning. By the way, the current zoning pattern, as it's shown here, this triangular parcel here that we're talking about was actually surplus back in the 1990s. It was left over. It was a remnant from the realignment of Cornerstone Highway. It was given to the city by the state, and of course the city had no need for it, surplused it. Prior to consummating that deal with the current owner, the city rezoned it from H3 to R4, and partly that intent was to try to be consistent with trying to maintain some improvements and lessen the intensity of land uses along Cornerstone Highway. And so that's what's put us in the circumstance where we're at today. So, like I said, it is, as I've been talking, it appears that it is probably a little more complicated than not. And that's why I'm suggesting there's not necessarily a simple answer here, but one that we think makes this street nullification today premature.
Well, Brian, to go back to your amazing artwork, sorry, point of clarification. Is there currently a plan? Did you say that there was a plan to do that, or are we thinking just future sometime? No,
this is where we're proposing as could be one option for interested parties to work towards.
Okay.
And Brian, I guess through your talk here today, I'm sorry, Shams, were you done?
No, you're good. Go ahead.
What is it about the potential vacation here that we're talking about that you would feel like would preclude the possibility of a larger development and the layout that you're showing us here exactly?
Well, so if we did something along these lines, what I'm suggesting is what is being proposed to be vacated here, they wind up having to be rededicated or purchased or something like that later on.
Sure.
Okay. So all I'm suggesting is we don't know what potentially could happen here. So to make the finding that this right-of-way is unneeded and unnecessary and excess and never to be used, trying to explain that's the process, the thought process we went through and couldn't make that finding.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Brian, I know that you're not LTU, but we have access management policies. And when I first saw this driveway off of the 1010 location that comes off of, comes in, is that kind of is that too close to the Dawes street
Well,
section?
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't meet any standard today. I don't believe.
So if these properties were to redevelop, it would probably be LTU's direction that they would want to get rid of that driveway there
Oh,
anyway.
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
But the intersection that you were proposing off of Northwest 10th, that would probably meet LTU's access management.
It may, if it didn't for some reason, whether angle or location or something, and required a deviation request, given that 9th Street would go away and this driveway would go away in lieu of that, Public Works had indicated that they would approve deviation requests like that.
Probably better meet the distance
Mhm.
requirements than what's there, okay. Now, it seems to me that we approved a TIF for the Cornhusker Highway, revitalization. Is that still ongoing? Where are we at with that? I know a lot of work's been done on this corridor, but
Yep, there has been, and there could be some more conversation with urban development in that regard. I did have a conversation with them about that. It's that you need I guess the bottom line, my thinking is, it's that you need a critical mass for it to be really of any value, right? And I don't know that we're talking about something large enough here. The other thing is really to start a dialogue about TIF is you've got to demonstrate some public benefit coming out of that. And I don't know, when I talk about public benefit, R4 to H3, it's really in terms different than I think urban development, what they mean when they talk about public benefit when it comes to TIF and tax increment financing.
so from the city's perspective, no real clear-cut timeline on developing this section.
No, I think the primary impetus is going to come from the property owners in the area. I think we've indicated a willingness to help to the extent that we can, and still do, and still want to help this owner, achieve some use of the property here. But beyond that, there's nothing yet.
Any other questions for staff right now? Okay. Applicant.
Can I borrow some of your artwork?
Actually, I'll leave them all here.
My name's Mark Becker with John Galtz. I'm the applicant and the owner of all of those properties. Not done this before, so. Okay, so several things. Let me start with this one. So I have this property rented out as a used car sales, and he has a couple of cars that go into this city right away. And he has this access here. I also own this house, and these properties. My purpose in doing this, I initially just went to see if I could get the large triangle area rezoned, and it doesn't look like that's going to be feasible. We've got too much money. It's going to be tied up in changing the city sewer, and just very problematic at this point. So,
Can you get a little closer to the mic?
Oh yeah, sorry. So basically, upon giving up on that, I wanted to try and fix the problem with the triangle. I will say I've owned these properties for 26 to 28 years, so I'm pretty familiar with the neighborhood. The only reason this is coming to a head is because I asked for this vacation. So for the last 28 years, I've been mowing and doing snow removal and weed removal to this piece of property. And last year I broke my mower mowing it because it needs some grading. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do all that work, I can kind of kill two birds with one stone. I can grade it out, and I can let my tenant park. It looks like about 3 cars that I would gain from that area. Also, the current state I've taken some photos. It's nothing that anyone's paying attention to as far as maintenance. You can kind of see the blockades and things. I think they could just be more attractive. So I think I would improve the area. So I think by vacating this, it gives me the option of grading it and maintaining it. There's about 100 foot of frontage that the city would be responsible for snow removal that I've done for the last 28 years. And now that I've brought their attention to it, now it's a problem on giving it up. They want to change the access to this, which makes no sense to me. First of all, this property here, which is a mini storage that I built about 20 years ago, is a buffer between residential, which I also own, and it's probably, not to blow my own horn, but it's probably one of the nicest buffers on West Cornhusker. It works really well. It's not high traffic commercial. It's attractive. My tenant loves it because it's both a sight and sound barrier. I think it makes a lot of sense. So what we do is vacate this road here, and was everybody going to carry their stuff to that mini storage? It makes no sense. There'd be no access at all. This is not a viable option at all. This would be a turn into this house. So everyone that comes down this road would be turning right into that house. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And we would have to you'd have to take property, the corner of my property here and my property there. And we really don't, I just don't see why that makes any sense. And if that actually makes sense in the future and it benefits the neighborhood, it's going to benefit me the most anyway. So I would be all for that. So I really don't have an agenda here other than to kind of improve the area. Long term, I think it makes sense to maybe put some mini storage here, but it would be so expensive to move the city sewer, city sanitary. I don't think it makes sense. I talked to Brian a little bit about maybe putting a big berm in here and moving the sewer over here, which we could do, and then just put some storage here. But I think it would be twice as expensive as would be practical. So for now, I think I think no one's interested in doing anything with that. I think I've owned it for 26 years. I don't think there's any urgency. I think I would just like to this summer get that regraded so that I can mow it and continue to maintain it. I don't think the city wants to take it over. And these other options, I mean, I'm very open-minded, but that makes no sense at all. I mean, I don't know how you would block off this road from this mini storage and have him drive through this house's yard, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I know it's different when you have it on paper than when you live it, and I'm pretty familiar with that area. So I would like to improve it just a little bit and continue maintaining it, but I think if we let the city take that over, it just doesn't make any sense to me. When you go to this picture, as far as we're looking for some continuity here, this is all commercial, this is all commercial. Putting that at residential doesn't make it, I mean, it seems to me like it would make more sense making it highway commercial. No one's going to want to put houses there. And if you can do some attractive buffer like what I did with the other storage, I think that makes the most sense. I just don't think it's economically feasible because of all the sewers. I think it's probably going to stay as a field for a while longer. That's most of my thoughts, I think. I don't know, do you guys have any questions?
I do.
Go ahead.
Okay. So could you tell me if this was vacated and sold, what would you do with the property? Would you?
That's what what I'm doing with it now. I would continue to mow it and remove the snow off the sidewalk, and I would immediately have it graded so that it can be mowed without catching. There's a bunch of there was a kind of a little forested area, like fence row trees, but probably a couple hundred of them, and I took all those out and cut the stumps out. But I think it was kind of a little bit of a dumping ground for a while before I had it.
Okay, so
put rocks and things out of it.
So you wouldn't necessarily, and I don't care one way or another, I'm just asking, extend the parking lot of the tenant to the north?
We leave it exactly the way it is now. It's just that 3 of the cars, as it is now, status quo, encroach onto the city's property.
Sure, no, I see
but
that.
It would be left exactly as it is now. It's not really feasible to do more with it.
Sure.
So there's no changes except for grading.
Okay. And then were you the buyer directly from the city of Lincoln at the time?
I was. I bought it from Fred Briggs back 28, 30 years ago.
Okay. And could you discuss a little bit in terms of what the city had said to you at that point in time as to why they were surplusing it and selling it?
I think it has to do with the arc of Cornhusker Highway. The state took a bunch of property over to deflect Cornhusker. That's my understanding. It's a little bit before my time. Michelle was in the office with Fred at the time, and so we talked about it as commercial property. So I made them, they were selling it as commercial property. I bought it as commercial property, and then just before we closed, they changed that one big parcel to residential. It was my understanding it would not be a problem to have it switched back some date in the future if we had an approved use, but they just wanted to maintain some control over what happened there so it wasn't something unsightly. And now I find out that that's not really the case, but you know, whatever. The biggest problem, honestly, is that city sanitary that's there.
The biggest problem is what?
The city sanitary, there's a sewer that runs diagonally across the property and takes up 50% of the property.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Other questions for the applicant? Oh, Mr. Campbell.
Is there any reason that you wouldn't just go ahead and grade it, fill in soil, whatever is needed, and use it as is?
Well, that would be my intention, but after maintaining this property for 26 years, I think it would be fair that they just concede it to me so that my tenant was given notice that he had a couple of his cars on the city property, and I said, I think that's actually my property. Checked into it and realized it was the city, so I thought, well, let me solve that problem. We can fix all this stuff and go forward. So I'm kind of trying to solve his problem and my problem at the same time. And honestly, I don't know if I have rights to go in with a grader and manipulate the city's property. It could cause erosion problems. I mean, I don't think it's going to. I'll do it right, but I don't know if I have that ability.
I would agree that I would think the city would have control over it.
Right. So I'd like to just, if I'm going to do it, I'd like to have it be my property, I guess. And I own, you know, all of the rest of the 2.5 blocks there contiguously on that road. So I'm going to do what's best for that area.
So the property on 2340 is a residential house, is that above the
yeah, that's
storage
a
facility?
residential house with a large lot, yeah.
Okay, and so then you have a tenant in that
correct.
building, okay.
And the house, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I was going to say the other house over here on West Dawes is also residential, but its highest and best use long-term will at some point be commercial, probably. Okay. I would like to say that the approach here, let me find a better photo. This approach, losing this approach would put this car lot out of business. They have no access except for that approach. You can come down the back, but it just really would make a mess there. And this whole area is a big yard area. So depending on how this gets developed, I mean, I would hate to lose that approach between now and then. That was my office for 10 or 15 years, and that approach is really kind of necessary. And I also think that deflecting all this commercial traffic, I mean, it's almost humorous. All this stuff is commercial. All this stuff is residential. Why would you want to deflect all this commercial traffic back in these houses? It doesn't make sense to me. I think you'd want to just keep it, you know, light commercial, light use commercial, and let it be used as a buffer for those houses. I mean, that's what I would think anyway.
The lot where you have the storage facility, what's directly to the west of that? To the east of that, right where the line is?
To the east of that?
Yeah.
That is an empty lot, but it's about 5 feet higher. So there's a huge grades difference. So it looks like you could just do access there, but that wouldn't be feasible.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions right now?
No.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Testimony and support for this application. Any testimony and support? No? Any testimony in opposition? Okay. Staff questions. I know I have a couple. Anyone else have a couple questions for Brian?
No.
No? Brian, can you remind me, can you have apartments in H3?
I don't think so. Let me take a look.
Steve says no.
You're getting a no from Steve.
Getting a no. But, so in R4, you could put an apartment complex there or duplexes.
By community unit plan, if you have enough area, that can work.
And I looked it up, there's a little bit over an acre there. How much do you have to have for a CUP?
An acre
Okay,
is the
that's what I
minimum.
thought.
Mhm.
Okay. So someone could come in there and do a CUP, put in some residential units if they wanted to.
Could.
And at that point, they could change the access to these properties if they wanted to.
Yes, that is true. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Other questions for staff right now?
No.
Okay. Applicant, any rebuttal? Says he's good. Okay.
I'll move to close the public hearing. Beckius?
Second, Campbell.
Jerry?
Okay, Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
I'd entertain a motion.
I have mixed signals.
Well, I would, let's entertain a motion to get something on the table.
Yep.
I will entertain a motion that the application does conform to the comprehensive plan.
Second, Campbell.
Discussion.
So, for lack of a better alternative here, we have a right-of-way encompassed by the same landowner that frankly is not being used, adjacent to a previously City of Lincoln owned property that the City of Lincoln determined they didn't want. I don't see how the idea of a potential redevelopment is necessarily practical or economically sound for the property owner. I don't know that this is a huge request. I don't feel like it precludes future redevelopment efforts, especially if the property owner wanted to potentially take a portion of Northwest 9th running from West Saunders to West Cornhusker. I don't think that part of the negotiation would preclude the closing of that street, the closing of the 1010 access, the 1010 West Cornhusker access, in order to get one more centered access point. The City of Lincoln has a request to vacate this, put it on the tax roll, and make it usable ground. In the interim, since the 90s, since when the larger parcel was sold off, and the adjacent property owners, we haven't seen significant redevelopment along West Cornhusker. I don't foresee that happening anytime soon. So I guess I don't know that this really jeopardizes much of anything. I think that generally speaking, getting used or unused property to a useful state is a core belief of our comprehensive plan. And with that, I'll stop.
Mr. Campbell?
I would also agree. I'm having great difficulty seeing Northwest 9th shut down with the storage units there for any other access to that property, and I do not see great improvement on Northwest 10th or West Saunders Avenue in that area. They look to be either unpaved or narrow paved. I think allowing that triangle to be moved to the private property owner, as Tom said, puts it back on the tax rolls, and it allows him to get it cleaned up and in a more presentable position.
I'm also in agreement with my two fellow commissioners to put this back on the tax rolls and give it a sense of ownership with people that are right next door using it in concept or taking care of it. So I am in support of the motion.
I could go either way on this one. I agree with putting it back on the tax rolls and getting some revenue generated for that. I could also see perhaps, as planning staff were describing some development happening here and alternative connections being made. I know that it's tough on a kind of a curve on like this to have good access. And closing off Northwest 9th, I don't know if that's really a good idea, but so I'm going to go ahead and support my fellow commissioners and get it back on the tax rolls. Jerry, go ahead and.
Okay, this is for finding of conformance of Street and Alley Vacation 20002. Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
And Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, let's see. Okay, under special permits, before I call item 4.3, I do want to indicate that this application should have been advertised as final action by the Planning Commission. Public testimony will be taken on this matter today and will be continued to the April 15th hearing as well. That will give us time to appropriately re-advertise for the public hearing as final action. So 4.3 is special permit 20008 to allow for the development of a community unit plan with up to 28 dwelling units with requested waivers to lot dimensions, setbacks, and the private roadway design standards on property generally located at Fletcher Avenue and Telluride Drive. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this item?
I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting the site?
No. All right, Rachel.
Rachel Jones, planning staff. This is a proposed community unit plan for 28 dwelling units under the existing R4 residential zoning. The application area is generally south of Fletcher Avenue, west of 27th Street, and it is adjacent to Telluride Drive on the west and Telluride Circle along the south. The proposed units would be fourplexes, and the developer is requesting that the 19 additional units permitted under the density standards be reserved. The units will take access off Telluride Circle as well as to a new internal private roadway through the property. There were several waivers requested to the private roadway standards as well as lot size and setbacks to allow for the logical development of the parcel within the proposed density. So we received several public comments on this from neighbors about the development of the lot. Primarily the comments, a lot of them related to its development causing a reduction of on-street parking along Telluride Circle. So the existing single-family attached dwellings on the south side of Telluride Circle here have little to no on-street parking along their properties because the driveways are so close to one another. And the south side of Telluride Circle was developed before we had adopted our minimum guest parking standards, which would have required more on-street parking along there. However, it's important to note this development is providing its own required guest parking internally, and it's showing actually more than the required minimum 14 guest parking stalls. And those are being provided off Kokomo Drive, which is the private roadway here, as well as some on-street parking along Kokomo Drive as well. That'll take any questions that you might have for me. Go ahead.
Rachel, you had mentioned that it exceeded the 14 required, but as I counted those parking stalls, I didn't come up with exceeding 14. Did I miscount?
The off-street parking there counts towards guest parking. Also, if there's at least 22 feet of contiguous curb space along the streets themselves, parallel parking, that would count towards that as well.
That counts towards that, okay.
Yes.
Because there's only 13 spots along there for that guest parking area.
Correct. Yeah, I think they've shown some vehicles parked on the drawing.
Right,
to just demonstrate.
Right, and around the corner.
Some areas where additional guests could park.
And do you know who owns, if you can go back to, the previous map you had up? Yeah. Can you tell me who owns the R3 piece that wraps around? In other words, behind those houses, but up on the circle, on the what would it be? The north side, east side. The east side.
Are you talking about?
Yeah, that area up there, right along the circle. I'm wondering if the existing residents couldn't go ahead and pay to put off-street parking in there for guests and such. It looks to be an outlot.
Yes, I imagine it's probably an outlot for a drainage way to the east there that we're talking about.
But I think it looks to be sufficient room to get parking stalls on the circle on that east side.
Okay, yeah. Along here you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, that, and Telluride Circle is a public street, so the public could park along it. It's outside the boundary of this particular application. It's actually within a different development.
Right.
So for them, for this proposal meeting its guest parking, they need to meet that within their own boundary.
Right.
Certainly, there is space on the circle that could contribute to additional space for the area as a whole.
Right. Well, and most of their complaints revolved around the fact that they're using Telluride Circle for their own parking, and that may be a solution for them to consider outside of this proposal.
Yes. Thank you.
Now, I would also argue, though, that those homes on the west side off of Telluride Drive, and just as you've turned on to Telluride Circle, though, that's a long way to go down to that circle to get guest parking. That is, that's a pretty long block, that's for sure. So.
Yep.
I was looking at the notes, Rachel, and has the sidewalk been done on Telluride Circle? I noticed that they asked for delays several times.
Oh, I do not believe it has, but for this development, it would be constructed.
It looks like there's
with final platting.
It looks like there's a sidewalk on the south side of this, of Telluride Circle, and just not on the north side.
Okay. Okay. I think my other questions are for Mr. Eckert.
Okay.
Any other questions for Ms. Jones right now? No. Okay. Applicants.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Mike Eckert with Civil Design Group here on behalf of Tucker Mountain LLC. I'll just follow up on what Rachel said and maybe give a little bit more background on the evolution of the project. So the client came to us and we went through multiple iterations on a layout, and most of which centered around either bringing in a cul-de-sac road here, having an additional fourplex front onto Telluride Drive, or coming in here with a cul-de-sac and getting more units that way. And so I applaud staff in that they kept challenging us to find a way to make a contiguous street through there, and then we soon discovered the only way we could do it was with several waivers to some of the design standards. And so I think all in all it worked out pretty well in that we got the interior road in and got it for vehicular circulation as well as pedestrian circulation, and got a unit count that worked for our client in terms of the cost of the land. And so yeah, then we continued to work on it, and yes, as Commissioner Campbell brought up, there's 13 stalls there, but what we also agreed to do was, when we originally laid all this out, we had it as a 21-foot wide driveway, and we were probably going to be able to get the 14 stalls that we needed there, but he agreed to widen it from 21 to 25 feet so that we could get additional on-street parking on one side. So I applaud him for doing that and agreeing to do that. It's going to make that roadway much more expensive. And so, you know, I think all in all, we're really at only 60% of the density that's allowed. And planning again agreed that this is a good fit with fourplexes that are like the duplexes across the street, two-story units. Each unit will have a two-stall parking garage, and we've been able to make sure that each unit also has the required 22 foot from the front of the garage to the back of the sidewalk. So you've got, each unit has 2 parking stalls in the garage, 2 parking stalls in front of the garage, and now we've got, you know, at least 19 or 20 accessory spaces outside of that. And so, as Rachel cited, it's unfortunate that the folks on the south, when that subdivision was developed, that those standards weren't there for them to provide the same for themselves. And then, and I appreciate your idea, Commissioner Campbell, and I checked that just a while back, and that area that goes around the cul-de-sac is owned by that last lot owner. But again, that may present an opportunity for them as an association to look at potentially doing something there, although it is somewhat distant. And there will still be gaps here on Telluride Circle. I think a car could fit in here, and a couple cars still fit in here, and multiple cars here. And then lastly, as was discussed, this developer will be responsible for putting in the sidewalk that we show on our site plans on the north side. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Mike, it looks like there's 19 unassigned units then?
Yes.
Is that correct?
And as you can see, there's really no space to do them. I think it's just typical for that to be reserved, mainly in the event many, many, many years down the road when the project's redeveloped, maybe it is allowed a little more intensity. But under the R4, there are unassigned units, but we've really, we've got as many as we can get in there.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, it's probably a little early to know this for sure, but do you know, is the product that would eventually go on this site slab on grade, or is it a basement product?
There'll be slab on grade, I believe. I don't think they're going to have a basement. We don't have any floodplain issues directly by here. Slab on grade and 2-story units.
Okay,
So
that sounds great. The reason I ask is because sometimes I think when we do slab on grade, we see people use their garage as storage,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So it's nice to, not only see by requirement the additional parking, but the recognition by all that could be very needed.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Okay.
I'm kind of clicking around here, and I'm assuming that you've probably been on site, and it's been a while since I've been over here. It looks like the existing homes across the street there, they look like they have short driveways, so they don't really have sufficient space to park in their driveway like this one will.
So I haven't looked that closely at the depth of them from their garage face to the back of the sidewalk. So the code that we live with now is that 22 foot.
Mm-hmm.
And we know the reality is there aren't a lot of vehicles that are 22 foot long. I think your average range is from maybe 12 to 16 feet. And so the impetus of all this is there's actually an ordinance that you cannot park in your driveway and have your vehicle overhang in to the sidewalk.
Right.
So, Commissioner Court, to answer your question, I don't know what their depths are. I did, just in looking at it visually the other day, you can see some are obviously deeper than others. And so, yeah, it's, and if I've gone and looked at various aerial photos over the years and at different times and went in on Google Earth, and there are usually cars parked on the north side, and there was one image I had where there were 2 boats parked in the grass on the other side. So I mean, it's been utilized, and I guess what we can say is we've done everything we can do not to take care of our needs beyond the code. And I would think that they're probably going to have to resort to utilizing their driveway parking more. And as long as their vehicle doesn't overhang the sidewalk, I do not believe it's a public health safety issue. So,
if you go back to the aerial of just the ones that exist, it shows cars parked and they're all way inside the sidewalk. So
yeah,
they must have at least a 22 foot.
Mm-hmm. They do.
Yeah.
Mike, can you tell me what the targeted sales price is going to be for these new units?
I don't know that. Just in the respect that they're still working on design. They're between 2 and 3 bedrooms with 2.25 baths, I understand. So, and I think the allotted, square foot's going to be around 1,800. So, Tom might be able to know that better than I, but I think on a build price, they're probably going to be in the neighborhood of at least $200,000 per
Mike,
unit.
for new construction, the units across Telluride on the south side would be considered very affordable for new construction.
Right.
At the time that they were constructed. And
Yeah.
would it be fair to say that the units being proposed today would be similar in nature?
I
perhaps?
think so.
Okay.
I don't know exactly where we're at right now on a cost per square foot.
It goes up every day.
It's been going up, and so, but I think the goal, when I spoke with the developer, is to be in that, say, 180 to 220,000 range. So
Would there be an HOA with this development?
yeah, there will be, because we have internal green space. It's actually a private roadway that'll be owned.
Okay.
So yes, there will be.
And so with regard to, there were some questions, I believe, on lighting and those types of things. Would that be something that would be controlled by the HOA in terms of external lighting?
Sure. And in fact, they're all singly platted lots, and so there's the same measurement of the candle brightness that can be spread onto the adjacent property.
Sure.
It's a private roadway, so we'll have to work with LES for the street lighting standard on that too, but that'll be normal. But because they're individually platted lots, they actually have to meet that standard.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
So there is some green space internally, And then also along Superior there's some green space, looks like there. There's also, I don't know if you can see my highlighting.
Yes.
When I zoomed in on the,
Yep.
is that for a sanitary sewer? Is that what that?
Storm
is that an
sewer.
So it's an easement there. I
Yeah.
couldn't tell if it was like a pedestrian path to the future path that's going to be along Superior.
No, it's not. I think that planning felt like our distance, let's zoom back out, for any of the pedestrians in here that wanted to get to the trail, they could go that way. That's going to be a grassed area. It's going to be an underground buried storm sewer. So, you know, it may be a reality that becomes a path, and maybe the association decides to put a sidewalk there to get out to the trail. But it is a storm sewer. It picks up the runoff. The street will drain this way and this way. It's all picked up here and taken out to there. Comes around back into the detention cell that was master planned as part of the development.
And then kind of off to the east there, that's an outlet, so that will be green space as well?
Right here?
Nope.
No. Here.
Yes.
Yes.
Ding,
Yes,
ding,
that's
ding,
just going to be green space. Yeah, just green space. We initially had kind of set that aside for a detention cell, and then as we reviewed the larger CUP detention for this property was accounted for, this was actually slated to be a church. And so our development is actually reducing the runoff, because that would have been pretty much 100% impervious surface with parking lot and church. But we had to just confirm that we weren't causing capacity issues in the pipes in Fletcher, and Public Works has signed off on that. But yeah, so that part of it will be green space, as well as all these interior areas here between the units. So.
Now, I know there was also a question in a letter talking about how Kokomo Drive comes out, and questioning if that was too close to the stop sign on Telluride Drive.
Yeah, so the dimension from here to here.
Yes.
Yeah, that is one of the waivers. It's only a few feet there. The distance from here to Telluride Circle is even less. But I think that in light of the overall need of providing an extra way out instead of having all the traffic come down onto Telluride Circle, that Planning and Public Works agreed that a waiver in this case was reasonable, in that there is still, from the stop portion there, adequate stacking. So that again was, I think something that in this case was good that the developer agreed to, put in more road with that overall goal of providing more parking, providing better routes for vehicles and pedestrians. And I think Public Works looked at that, Commissioner Core, and felt like this would be a reasonable case that, that one, I wish I had the number, I'm sorry, but we're only a few feet shy of the standard.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Eckert right now? Okay, thank you. Testimony and support. Testimony and support. No testimony and support. Okay, testimony and opposition.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead and give us your name and address.
My name is, excuse me, Ellie Hardikoff, and the letter I sent in has my old address for some reason, but I live at 2365 Telluride Circle.
Okay.
And I'm in opposition of this project to some degree. I mean, I walked the neighborhood and talked to the owners that live there, and I ran the appraisal list on who lives on Telluride Circle, and out of the 32, there's only 12 homeowners. The rest are all rental. So that means there's extra cars always on the lot or on the street. And in fact, when I left work this morning, there's 12 parked vehicles. And most of them will start from Telluride Drive and come back to the half circle. So, I'm not sure if that's upside down. So cars were parked from here to about here. The circle away that was mentioned earlier, that's kind of a water runoff, and there's not much space back there. And the people that live in those complexes around that circle park that full. Because I have a camper and I have to turn around in that circle, and there's not always enough room to kind of get turned around down in there. So some of the things I guess I'd like to point out is why do we need 28 units? Because we all know when you put a lot of people in a small space, what happens? You have more traffic, you have more trash, and you have more people. And the comment about Telluride Circle, it's not a very wide road. In fact, I can't even back out of my driveway completely without taking a sharp angle because the neighbor parks behind my driveway. So now you take away all that parking. There is no, I mean, it's bad enough when you get traffic, you can't have 3 cars on that road at the same time. With a car parked there and another vehicle, you've got to jockey around a little bit just to even get out of the street. So now that you put all of these driveways here, you've taken up 3/4 of that road. So now where do we park? And if you look at this space here, this is all no parking on Telluride Drive. In fact, all of Telluride Drive is no parking. You have to go up to North 23rd, and then you're into this residential area here before you can even begin to park on the street or past 2 or 3 houses up here going to the west. So now if I have a dinner party, where do people park? My driveway won't hold 4 cars, and it's just me. And of the 12, out of the 30 units, 32 units that are only homeowners, the rest are rental. So there's a couple houses that have 4 or 5 cars all the time in the driveway. They encroach the sidewalks already, so we have kids that ride bikes. So I'm just concerned about where do we park? Telluride Circle homeowners, it's not an HOA. We don't have an association. So now if you force us to have no street parking, who's going to pay for street parking if they want to do something with that circle? I mean, I paid to have parking in my neighborhood. I shouldn't have to pay again to have parking in my neighborhood.
While this map is up, could you point out which, if you can tell, which unit is yours?
Mm-hmm. I'm the
6 in.
I'm the 4th one in, so it'd be right here.
Okay.
So I'd actually have on the new plot, I'd have somebody's driveway right in front of me.
Thank you.
Which is fine, but if I can't get in and out with traffic coming in and out and no place to park, and literally, like the gentleman said earlier, there is no parking between our houses. The driveways take up the whole south side of the street. And that was one red flag that when I first moved into the neighborhood, somebody immediately came out of their house and said, "You can't park on this side of the street. You can only park on the north side." So that's let me see here. I'm just curious as to why. I mean, I gained a little bit more insight from that gentleman there, but why does Kokomo Drive have to be a clear-through street? The reason I'm asking that, if you look at where it comes out at, it's over half of Telluride Circle. That is not convenient for anybody to come off of Telluride Drive and drive clear around basically half a block to get into your house. When all these houses here are going to exit that way, I would bet 9 times out of 10. These people already have their driveway here, so they're already going to come up Telluride Circle, but I don't understand why that has to be clear through. Why couldn't that be a dead end? Why couldn't they put some additional just stall parking there for the rest of us in the neighborhood that already you're taking away our parking for additional spaces to park? And the comment I read in one of the pieces of information said something about fire trucks getting in and out. Well, I can guarantee you a fire truck cannot get in and out of Telluride Circle as it is today. And now you add more cars and more driveways. That doesn't make sense to me to have that street go clear through. I'm a little concerned about the comment that was in the literature from the city that number 7 of the page 3, number 7 of the recommended approval and conditions, the analysis, It says with the proposed development, on-street parking on the north side will be reduced by the driveways for the new units. While this will reduce the overall amount of on-street parking on Telluride Circle, the proposed development will meet its own guest parking requirements internally. It would not be appropriate to require this new development to address parking issues for existing lots outside of its boundary. So again, what are we supposed to do? I bought my house, June will be 2 years. I bought it as an investment so I can retire and have a better place to live. And now you're taking my street parking away, and now you're going to probably ask me to pay money to pay for more parking for something. And I don't get it. So I understand codes and stuff changes, but that street isn't a traditional wide neighborhood street. And I don't know what our recourse is. I mean, how do we take care of ourselves? I've only been there 2 years, like I said, but the development's been there since 2006. Neighbors are asking the same thing. How do we take care of our family and friends that want to come visit us when we're being treated like we live in an apartment and you got to park on a street 2 blocks away? I kind of asked the question, or the gentleman kind of addressed this question that I was going to ask, was about the housing. Again, might be 1,800 square feet, and it might be 2-story, and it might be 2 or 3 bedroom, but you have absolutely no place for kids to play. There is some green space, but when there's not any place for kids to play, and the circle already has majority rentals, I guarantee you that's going to be, most of that property is going to be rentals. So now, not only are you getting more than 2 cars, you're getting more than the additional 1 per unit in that area. So where are those cars going to park? Because they're only adding additional parking space or parking pad up here somewhere, and then they're requiring people to park on their street. Well, it's not going to handle all that if it's rental. And then I guess the last thing I would add was, at work we always challenge people, and we're always saying, does this feel right to you? Does it seem like it's the best thing to do? Is it of value? And I guess there's 3 things that make me want to ask that question. Does this feel right? And my question would be the number of units per that space that's going in. Taking away the street parking, does that feel right? And then 2, if you're doing all these waivers to make room for this development, does that feel right? Does it make sense to put all those waivers in and take away parking and then build a unit that's going to potentially degrade the neighborhood just because of there's no parking? So I guess that's my 2 cents.
I do want to ask you for clarification on a comment that you made. You say that you're going to have to pay money for parking. I'm not sure I'm following.
Well, the comment was made, maybe, I think Mr. Campbell said that maybe add additional parking at the circle. Who's going to do that?
Okay.
Is the city going to do it because now we lost our parking? I mean, I don't feel I should have to do that because the developer's pushing our free parking out by opening all those driveways along Telluride Circle.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other testimony in opposition? I can't see him.
No one's
No,
coming.
Doesn't
no,
look like it.
okay. Staff questions.
Rachel, I know we touched on this, but can you explain again the decision to make Kokomo?
Wait.
Oh.
Rachel, can I jump here for just a second?
Yeah. Oh, that's.
Tennessee City Law again. I'm going to suggest we not do staff questions because we may have folks that want to come and testify next week that raise issues that may not have come up yet. And so I think we should reserve our staff questions until next week. And so I think
But what if I don't want to forget my question.
Write them down.
Write it down.
I did, but.
I think the next course of action is probably a motion to continue action on this with public hearing at the meeting on April 15th, I believe.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks,
So
Sam.
move continuance to the next meeting with public hearing staying open.
Second.
Jerry?
El Padre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Request a 10-minute.
Yes,
Break?
so let's take a break for, let's go to, how about till 3:30?
Thank you. We have to make a motion?
No.
No,
Okay.
no.
We're back.
All right, moving on to public hearing item. 4.5 is administrative amendment 20007 to appeal to the planning, or an appeal to the planning director's denial to amend the land use trip table for properties located within the Appian Way Regional Center Phase 2 Commercial Center, generally located at South 87th and Highway 2. Staff recommendation is for denial. This is final action on this item unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information that you learned while visiting the site?
No. Brian?
Good afternoon, Brian Will again, Planning Department. Again, this is an appeal to the Planning Commission of the Planning Director's denial of an administrative amendment. So it comes to the Planning Commission essentially as an application, as a new application that has not been denied or appealed or approved. Sorry. This was an appeal submitted, an administrative amendment submitted by Mr. David Fiala, and it was submitted to amend the land use and trip generation table for use permit 150. Mr. Fiala had disputed some of the trip generation rates and other information from the trip generation table on the use permit. That amendment was denied by the planning director, and primarily for two reasons. Primarily, the first reason was the biggest one, in that it sought to change information not only on the applicant's property, but also multiple other properties throughout the development. And so, I mean, we do dozens of administrative amendments throughout the year, but I would say that primarily they are amendments submitted to modify your property, your interest, your specific concern. In the case of where it does affect others or affects multiple property owners, we'd suggest that that's something that should come back to Planning Commission for public hearing, unless you have some letter of acknowledgement, something signed by all of those other affected owners that they support it. Well, in the case of this one, the Planning Department felt that it was highly unlikely that we were going to get in writing from those other property owners affected that they supported this amendment. And I guess I'd add to that, at about simultaneously, at the time this was submitted, the developer for Appian Way, Iger Corp., submitted amendments to both the use permit 150 and special permit 2046 for the Appian Way Regional Center Phase 2, south side of Highway 2, to entirely eliminate the land use and trip generation tables from those permits. Those were approved by the Planning Commission on March 4th of 2020, and that action was final approval by this body unless appealed to the City Council, which it was not. And so upon that action, neither one of those two permits have a land use table as part of it. And so for that reason, we are suggesting that this appeal is moot because that land use table does not exist as part of those permits anymore. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Go ahead.
So just a real quick question. I know that we had talked about previously, is there other places that still use the land use, or was the one that you just mentioned in March the last one?
No, this is not the only one. I think there are two others.
There's still two others in existence?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can't remember off the top of my head which two they are.
No worries. Yeah, no worries.
I think South Point is one of them also that has some trip generation involved with that. But so no, this was not the only one.
And just out of curiosity, the last two wouldn't do anything unless they needed to for a project, or would it be I mean, why would they spend the time and effort to do it?
You mean the other two that
Right,
still
the last
have it?
two, yeah.
Well, I mean, like I said, it depends. It's case by case.
Mhm.
In the case of this one,
Mhm.
remember, as last time we, sorry, talked, the last time we talked about this, the developer, Iger Corp., was given a letter of satisfaction and completion from the city for the annexation agreement, which again was the primary reason that this land use and trip generation table was included. It was to track to make sure that this developer didn't exceed the level of development commensurate with his financial participation. The terms of the annexation agreement were satisfied, and there was no danger of that happening. So that letter was issued. And the other two, I can't tell you the details of that. I don't know that the circumstances are the same.
No, that's good. What you reminded was what I needed to know. Thank you.
Okay, yep.
Any other questions for Brian right now?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. We're ready for the applicant. One minute. Oh. Yep.
Good afternoon. I do have a few handouts, 3 handouts. Who should I give them to?
Okay, we aren't accepting handouts. It's been recommended that you use the Elmo or the overhead projector, and then you can leave copies there on the podium, and we'll include those in the record.
Just leave them over here?
Yep.
Yep.
And then you can use one to project it on the
On the
document
projector there
camera.
so we can all see.
Yeah, I have them over
Yep.
here.
And that should work pretty well.
Good afternoon. I'm David Fiala, managing member of FAA Properties, a entity that owns a property at 84th and Highway 2, Prairie Lake Plaza South, which is the southeast corner of that 84th and Highway 2 intersection over to 91st Street. Our office or our property there is at 8601 Amber Hill Court. I am the applicant, and just a threshold item in regards to procedurally what is moved forward, and I've had some discussions just even outside as we were waiting, since we're behind schedule a little bit, and it's still disheartening as a property owner and saying, hey, we have rights, and we're just discussing them in procedure, and how you just get ignored all the time, and your rights are not looked at as important when not only am I showing procedurally what's correct, factually what's correct, we start having a discussion about fact or opinion. And I start getting told something's my opinion, and I'm like, I'm a economist and analyst for a living. I find documents, I point to the document, and I said this is a fact, right? So there are these ITE Transportation 6th edition manual. It's a book. Iger Corp had one. Clark Anderson had them. The city allegedly never had them. Okay. Prior to this even coming to this planning commission, or should it even need to, did I ask Iger when they represented numbers? I said, hey, I want to, I just want all the data behind that to support what you said, because it seems fishy. Something doesn't seem right. So this was 2015 when this started. Hey, can I see the book? Can I see that page? Same with Clark Anderson. And I know Dennis isn't in here. He's with Clark Anderson when this is just till last year, so this is going on for 4 years. I asked Tim Gergen for the book. I said, I just want to see this data. There's multiple numbers for the same thing, which makes no sense. You were involved before we bought the ground. This decision by the city happened after we bought the ground. And if we focus in here, on this, on the thing, this is the notice we got for the increase in our PM trips by the city. 0. We didn't get it. I brought this up to the city. There's no notice. There's no documentation of any notice provided to us as a property owner to increase our PM trip count for this development. So in regards to providing notice, I said, hey, we have the right to notice when something's changed on our own property. So it had nothing to do with whole development, just our individual property. The application that went through actually was February 5th when I was here, and I got into this a little bit of an issue with, hey, if this is only talking about approvals and someone gets to use their property and that's it, and there's no other recourse or issue with this trip counts, it doesn't matter. They're approved, it doesn't matter. And I made that clear that day for that application, which I said I'm gonna keep that out of this application that I had already provided to the city in January prior to that hearing that was on an appeal that I provided. I didn't get notice of that approval, and I'm across the street from the previous owner, or the previous applicant for that matter. But I showed in the book, hey, here's the number in the book, here's the number in the table. They're not the same. I didn't get these books until December. So what I talk about fact or fiction, right? Then there's another F word, and it's fraud. If this activity created a financial advantage over somebody, that's fraud. That's the definition of fraud. And that's what I found. And I've expressed this with the city, and now I'm going to move forward even within my rights within these application processes in terms of the timing of when I found this and what I would expect, and I think all taxpayers would expect from city employees when this is found and put in front of them. If somebody was using the city to harm potential investors into real estate, our project's a $4 million build that we built that we're paying property taxes and generating revenue on this site that we built that we're happy about, we hope the city's happy about. But I mentioned we didn't even get a notice to this increase on our property. But we just want to say, hey, we have rights. We have rights to an application. We have rights to be treated fairly. If we provide information that the city's been approved that's been provided to them by somebody else that constitute fraud, and we understand that, I would expect the reaction of someone that works for the city, one of our taxpayers, to say, we need to fix this. This is wrong. That's it. That's the reaction I expect. And I think all taxpayers should expect that. And Tracy, you weren't here last time. Nice to see you again. I don't think I've seen you in years. But what I showed was, and I'll get into that here as I get flowing through these documents, and I won't be too long. But what I shared was this was set up. Of course, there was no documentation to support having this trip calculation as a way to generate assessed dues to the association. So therefore, if there was some malfeasance or improper calculation to increase someone's dues, that would sometimes, whether that's going to have them pay more. If we go back to fact or fiction, or fact or an opinion, the number in the book's a fact. And since December I got the book, I'm pointing to it, and I've been told it's my opinion what the number is. Instead of the city saying, hey, this is wrong, we should fix it. And I don't, when I have, this is including Dennis. Dennis told me point blank these numbers came from the city, they didn't come from Tim Gergen. Point blank, these calculations came from the city. This is after Tim wouldn't get back to me, and I ended up calling Clark Anderson. I said, hey, this is kind of bad. I think I really need to talk to somebody who's a supervisor, and I got a call from Dennis. Sure. Point blank, he told me, this is from the city. Those numbers came from the city, they didn't come from us. And I found that to be false. Why he believed that is what it is, but I followed up. Hey, you guys didn't follow up with me. You should be wanting to correct this. You're a professional with professional ethics standards. You should be wanting to correct this. So, moving forward, I did the research. I finally got the book. I did the following, and one thing I will put on here first in regards to the amendment. Okay, there's 19 calculations that this is subject to, or maybe one less since the one I left out in regards to the hearing from February 5th. But the application was provided in the end of January. The process of vetting out this information with the city started in December when I got the book. I said, whoa, these numbers are wrong. Let's get this fixed. I got the support now to show this, so let's have an amendment. So I think Brian, when he said there was 2 reasons that they didn't approve this application, he said one was an application came in later by Iger Corp to a property owner in the association now, not the developer with the rights as the association has had since 2008. He said the reason they put an application in to delete it. I started talking to the city in 2018. I don't get told that they didn't actually verify the books. They didn't have the books. They were just signing off on it, not even double checking it because they said it wasn't important, which I agree with. I understand because it doesn't matter anymore if the application is approved. Just like what the Gotcha Covered was applied as a specialty retail use. That wasn't me. That came from Iger. Especially retail use, I say I agree that's the right use. Within that organization, they build homes, sell flooring, sell appliances, sell wall fixtures, sell windows, sell roofing, sell furniture. They do all these things, but we want to call them a warehouse. Instead of having a 40 trip number to pay more dues, they only had a 4.
So
There was no other
So
reason.
you're gonna have to kind of,
Okay,
wrap it
I'm
up.
the applicant.
That's right, but you need to request more time if you need it and you
I
haven't.
do need more time.
Okay, so
All right, I'll move forward quicker. Thanks, Kirsty. The point is on this, they reviewed all the numbers. This is what I received back. And they reviewed everything. The only thing that they're pointing is there was a typo for a 4.38 is actually a 3.6. Okay, on lot B1, block 4. B1, lot 4. One little change, and again, this is Exhibit A, second page of the application to illustrate the application as far as the correction of the numbers. It doesn't make a difference for what the actual result was. So there's no material difference within that correction. So they reviewed this with the correct ITE data. So this up here, it says, and this is including with the previous, talks about the 6th edition data trip rates is what's on the table. 6th edition book. And I went through and I just corrected the numbers. Okay, the city didn't make any notes of any material thing that was wrong. Okay, I had FHU engineers, I had Mark review this. Notice these tables found inconsistencies and ununiform data in the table calculations. Okay, this means money. Sorry, a lot of money, and he's finding all these inconsistencies that he agreed with. And you'll have a copy of this. I asked you to review. Just a 1-page summary. He didn't get complicated at all. And he said it's actually data from the manual. This is why I had the handouts, because it would be easier for you guys to look at them. And one of the things he brought up that was a difference between, this is getting a little more technical, but it's not complicated. Within this ITE book, there may be 2 different studies. The PM peak hour trip, which was called for in the annex agreement, was one study. There was also a reference that he said now they use more of the 4 to 6 p.m. studies. There's not that much difference between the numbers, but we actually did it, and you can review it, and I'll leave these copies here. But what he's showing here is he's agreeing, this was the original table, which I'll reference back a couple times, but he reviewed the same data and said he agreed with it. And he provided even the other, the 4 to 6 hour, just another commonly used. He said today that's what a professional would use, is this study instead of that. And it also shows the numbers and the differences that are very similar.
What is,
So
the,
again,
what is the material difference?
Thank you, that's a great question. This is the number for block 3, lot 1, 1.28. That was represented as the number before, 3.53. As part of the application, let me jump forward. Within the documents that were populated within the involvement of Clark Anderson and Morrow Poppy Law for the association, and this is the one for us particularly, they represented the calculation was 172. This would have been a trip number in here of 6.32. All we needed to see is the number in the book. This is why this is important. This application was in on time. I have the right to put in the application to do so.
So if you could kind of maybe wrap it up.
So in regards to the application, one of the items that I brought forward in regards to the proper party to even file the application to remove the trip table, this is required by a vote of the members of the association to do so. I was told that that's my opinion. I said, well, it's not a party, it wasn't an agreement with the city for the property nonprofit association filing. I'm like, it's a publicly filed document. All the members have to sign off on it. In terms of the application that I walked through, and I know this is one of the problems when I don't really have a chance to talk to you and I get such a short period of time, that the city, before this, they don't walk through this with me, and I've provided it to them to spend the time. But within the annex agreement, there's the peak and peak hour study, which is why that was used in the amendment that I made. I did all the work, I did all the math that just needed to get verified. And as an independent body, as the commissioners, I'm asking for you to prove it. We don't, and I also expressed this with the city in regards to even, I'm in favor of moving forward with the association, and we get rid of the table moving forward, and we do it internally. But procedurally, I had the right for this amendment, and I'll explain why I had the right to make adjustments for everybody. But in terms of saying, oh, now that we've got the truth out on the table, an amendment that the city can't find a problem with, now we want to file an amendment to delete it after 15 years? An application that was filed at the end of last year, but now that we found the fraud and it's up in daylight, we want to get rid of it. I have the right to have this approved. It was in prior to the other one. First of all, a reaction to something you don't disagree with isn't to say scrap it, and that shouldn't be the reaction of the city or the commission in terms of a responsible way to say, this was wrong, guys. This should have got fixed. This guy went to an independent engineer. I also went to the Public Works Department, and I talked, who's now, I'm assuming, retired, to Randy Hoskins. I also had him review the annex agreement, and his comment was, he noticed the same typo. He said, your calculations appear to be correct. And I didn't just give him the calculations, I said, here's the pages from the book. As part of my application, again, fact or opinion, at 492, here's the rate, 128. That's the rate. I went through, got the data. I have the data with the application to support all the changes. The city didn't find anything wrong. To me, that should have said it should have been approved. Why wouldn't you approve it? Procedurally, I don't see an issue with the commission saying, you know what, nothing's been shown that this was wrong. The city should have approved it. It doesn't matter if the table's deleted later. I'm asking for a documented review by the city, which is what is supposed to happen when items are provided to the city, and stamp it and say we approve it. The data's approved. This isn't my opinion. These are the facts. The city didn't disagree with the facts. They just want the past malfeasance to be gone and not talk about it. And I said, no, you guys should take note for this and in the future that things matter. You can take the time to go in a book and provide the correct data. Lastly, in regards to the right for a property owner to audit within the association, which is the body that has the power to get rid of this table, not Iger, they're an individual owner at this time, is within our protective covenants. These are the publicly filed protective covenants. Well, I have the other page here. These calculations, rules, guides promulgated by the city. It's in writing. The city provided these numbers, not us. That was a fraud. And again, I've showed this before, but this is what it meant over a 4-year period in regards to overcharging dues that were paid, 42 grand. And there's a red flag of the fraud. Anybody with a property owner that's in an association that's only paying for snow removal on the streets and a little bit of mowing, everybody else has their yard responsibilities. I have 5 other, I own property, mostly residential, but 5 others. They range from, they've ranged from $1,200 a year to $300 a year. We got bills for $34,000. That's crazy. Is that a red flag of fraud? Yes, it's a red flag of fraud. In regards to the board minutes,
do you want to?
I think that you've shared enough information. I mean, in your time. So I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next part.
Okay.
So any testimony in support?
Can we ask him some questions?
Oh, yep, sure.
If I'm understanding you right, basically your argument has to do with the fact of your CAM charges based upon the numbers from the PM trip counts. Is that correct?
it is not fully correct. That is diverting away from the topic of these calculations and the correct of them. I'm saying they mean something. Fraud has occurred. Here, I'll show you.
That's your reason why you're here, but it doesn't deflect from the fact that you want the trip calculator to be correct.
Yes, it should be correct, and it is correct. These are supported numbers. These aren't my opinion. These are the numbers from the book. I even went and got additional opinions.
But shouldn't the association come up with a different method of calculating CAM charges since there are no PM trip counts anymore?
Again, that would be a great topic. That's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is the fraud. And again, this is the state statute for fraud.
Any other questions?
Zoom in. Person commits theft if they obtain property by another by deception. A person deceives if he intentionally creates or reinforces a false impression of law, value, or intention. If you're saying that this calculation came from the city, that's lying, that's deceptive. If the city's getting involved in this and saying, sign it, oh, don't listen to these property owners, don't help them, that's deception and not being truthful and deceiving, I think, the city attorney's office and the city planning's office.
Okay.
So this is You know, and I,
Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Fiala at this point? No?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Do we have testimony in support? Testimony, I can't, is there anyone back there? Testimony in opposition?
No.
Okay.
They said no.
Staff?
Abby Luttrell, Law Department. I'll just reiterate what Brian said at the beginning. It's the law's position and planning's position that at this point in time, these tables do not exist. And so as there is nothing to amend or change. Planning has been considering that for some time. You made that decision on March 4th. The period to appeal has lapsed. So that is the state of those permits at this time, and it would be law's position that you can't amend something and that this application for amendment is moot. Questions?
But you feel like the ability to appeal is not?
The ordinance reads that when Planning Commission takes final action, that that action can be appealed for 14 days to City Council. That 14 days has passed from March 4th, when the trip tables were deleted.
Okay. And the applicants administrative amendment denial by the planning director is what got us here today. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
So he's appealing the denial, and that comes to you as treat it like a brand new application.
Okay.
So.
Okay. City's position has been unchanged, that they previously thought and believed that the trip count calculation was correct.
That's not the question before you.
I understand that that's not the question before us.
I don't know that the city has had an opportunity to consider that question because that was not brought to the Planning Commission until now. It's before you for the first time. So my advice to you and law's position would be that you don't get to that question because the table doesn't exist. And planning didn't render an opinion on whether those figures were correct or not because the table doesn't exist.
But generally speaking, the City of Lincoln, you believe that the City of Lincoln Planning Department, that their decision-making process is generally valid?
The formal process always has a public component to it. So, and this is Mr. Fiala's chance to have a public, so I don't know, valid. There is a process in place that allows, there's a due process in place, and appearance here is one component of that. Appearance at the City Council is another. And the applicant here is free to consult with a private attorney and see what his other options are.
Okay. Thank you, Abby.
So we're not being asked today to determine if this is fraud or anything else. We're here to decide on this trip generation table, which is no longer applicable.
That's right. I think part of this is a function of timing. If this had come to you, I know that this has been in place for 20 years. If this came to you
In year one instead of year 20?
or even 6 months ago, then your task would be different than it is here.
Any other questions for Abby or other staff?
So just so I make sure, triple check. So there is no recourse right now that you will bring up or can bring up because of the position that the city has on that, city law?
What do you mean by recourse?
So because the public has come forth and asked about it, can we, or can you, or can the planning department advise how to maybe approach it or fix it or do, I don't know what needs to be done, so, but I don't know how to say that.
At this point in time, the applicant's recourse would be to sue the city?
After this, he can appeal to City Council.
Okay.
And at that point, I can't give legal advice to a private party. But but there may be civil remedies that he could discuss with a private attorney. The way that I see this request is looking to go back in time and change something that existed in the past. It's law's position and opinion that this body can't do that. It must address what it has before it, and it's these trip tables don't appear, so they can't be amended.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
No.
Okay, questions for the applicant?
No.
Okay,
Unfortunately, I
rebuttal?
don't have any questions. Okay. Okay.
In terms of what's supposed to happen, I think I assume this would happen is when fraud happens and you report it, you expect to get investigated and prosecuted. I mean, that's what should happen, not you guys worrying about if the city's gonna get sued because they're, instead of doing the right thing and said, approved. You had all the numbers, I did all the math, I had Randy check it with the city works department, I had an independent individual check it, they had all the pages. I didn't get it, you know, this was, in the past, this was raised for us, so nobody gave us notice. Part of my application, and have you guys actually seen the application? www.plpsouth.com. I set up a website, it's there, the application, the full application. Did all this work and then people don't even look at the work. I did all the math, everything's there. It's Prairie Lake Plaza South is the name of the association. So it's just plpsouth.com. It's there. But within the application, you know, I went through the documents and the steps. So it was just approve it. This is what I'm saying with the city. You shouldn't worry about getting sued. You should have approved it. And I'm not going to sue the city, by the way. But why would this conversation need to be here? Just approve it. There's nothing not to approve. In terms of other property owners and their rights, I'm showing I sent everybody, the certified mails are part of my application that I sent to everybody. They had an opportunity to respond to the city, and the response was, let's delete it. And I'm saying, hey, this is fraud. And you know what happened instead of, and I showed the bank statements. So part of the fraud was even, and I'm just saying there's fraud within the cost share, there's fraud within the expenses. Here's this is from a board meeting provided by Morrow Poppy Law.
I'm sorry.
I'm explaining.
Okay, I just have a quick
rebut
question.
What she said. Yeah.
But if you're talking about investigating fraud, I don't understand.
Oh, that's relevant to
The
our
planning
hearing today.
commission
That's not our
does not have an
purview.
investigative capability or any kind of law
It is
enforcement
relevant.
capability.
Not our purview, yeah.
Here's why I believe it is relevant. There's an appeal process. I'm not asking to go mess with the table. I'm saying approve the application, approve these numbers. Everybody in the association has been provided these numbers, the support. I even put a website up for them to go look at it. They've all got this website. Nobody's here. I actually didn't notice that the city actually mailed notice to everybody. I mailed that notice of this hearing today. Everybody has an opportunity to be here. Everybody said, hey, I don't agree with this page, but of course you can't because it's fact. It's a page. It's their use. No uses were changed, only the calculations. Those uses, all the same. I just went to the book. It's a number in the book. Within that full application, you can go back and the numbers that are on that table are there. So I'm saying this is fraud that I'm correcting, and the city's position should be, yep, let's correct it, let's get out of it. The appeal process should be an appeal process. You're an independent body that said, should the city approve this? This was vetted, and again, my question started in 2018 with the city. And I didn't get answers that I feel like I should have and anybody should have. And in terms of, there's no way we verified those numbers in the book. I would have went after that book a long time ago instead of keep getting told by Iger and Clark Anderson, I'm going to get that book, and then they never give it to me for a year. That went on. That's deception. It's the definition of deception when they did that. And the other part is just the cost share. The common mowing at this association, it's so small. There's 2/3 of a mile of street for snow removal, and something like mowing, there's 36,000.
Sir, this is not in any way, shape, or form relevant to the issue before us. I'm gonna have
I'm
to cut you
rebutting what
off.
was
I'm
said,
sorry.
because this is what's
You're at 4
occurred.
minutes, so you got 1 minute to wrap it up.
Okay. Well, what we found is all the payments are going to Iger representatives. Okay, representations of $30-some thousand. Well, this is fraud that's been going on for a long time. There was a court case in 2014, represented the same mowing. Guess what that expense was represented by Iger in court? $7,600 one year for an expense for mowing. $5,700 expense another year for mowing. These are accurate. This is right. This is bid out stuff today. That's fraud. This is what fraud is in an association. Just like if you applicate fraud in cost share.
But that's not our purview to rule on that. We have to look at land use
This is
issues.
correct. The land use, I'm just trying to get someone to say, yep, that's right. I agree. No, nobody should deny the right numbers that have been fully proven as fact through a book with the city. I'm appealing to the Planning Commission to say, look, all these numbers are here. The city didn't come forward. No property owner came forward and said these are wrong, right? That's a fact. They've got every opportunity. They're right. So why not approve something that's right? This is an application to approve. We're not going to go change any tables moving
5
forward.
minutes
This can be
are up.
approved, and that's the point of an independent body, Tracy.
Okay.
That's why there's an appeal process. that
But
you
this
say,
isn't the right independent body for that decision.
To approve the application, it is. You can approve it. Say this is right, we should approve it.
Thank you.
Thank you for
You're
your
welcome.
time.
Thanks for the consideration.
I'll move closing public hearing.
Second.
Jerry?
Okay, Albadre,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
I would move that we deny administrative amendment 20007.
Second, Beckius.
Discussion.
This is an issue between Iger Corp and Mr. Fiala, and it has to do with the CAM charges. And it's because those were all based on PM trip counts. The PM trip count chart is gone now. So the discussion should relate to the association refiguring how they're going to break down the CAM charges to each of the properties. And that's not this body's purview.
What I agree with Commissioner Campbell. I don't see a table being a part of this development any longer. I don't know that we can go back and amend it. I won't sit here and say that I don't think you may not have valid grievances with your common area maintenance between yourself and the developer, whoever is managing that. And I do think that an accurate trip count number that is being used for whatever purpose, I don't care what the purpose is, by the city of Lincoln should be accurate. But unfortunately, I don't think the Planning Commission is the body in which to address those concerns. And I think honestly, a lot of these concerns are being confused by the fact that they're being reiterated in context with common area maintenance that really is not the point. The point is whether or not the trip count's correct. But that's going backwards in time, and today we don't have a table.
And I'll be voting for the denial, and I understand our role as a planning commission, and I do appreciate the fact that we all take the time to listen to the public and give them a forum to discuss items that are in front of them and challenges for them in their land and planning moving forward and those types of things. And but we do have a role here that we're going to need to carry forth, and that will be my position.
Okay, Jerry.
Okay, this is for the denial of Administrative Amendment 20007. Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
At this point, we generally invite anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda to come forward and do so. However, we are suspending this portion of the hearing until further notice. If you do have comments, you should direct them by email to plan@lincoln.ne.gov or by calling 402-441-7941. I would entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second, Joy.
Jerry?
Was that Beckius?
Yes,
Okay,
sorry.
thank you, that's okay.
He's quick.
Albadre?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
We are adjourned. Thank you.